Hey, what's up you guys? Welcome back. So I got another comment from one of my viewers in one of my last videos about PayPal. So the Sheilas asked, could you please do a PayPal call option versus stock purchase at these price levels? So I think this is a great idea, so why don't we do that today? In particular, this video will come to you in 3 parts. So number 1, we're going to go through exactly what options are and how they work. And if you already know, you can maybe skip this section, but just for the beginners, I'm going to go through the options kind of basics of how they work. So number 2, we're going to go through a real life example using PayPal as the underlying stock, and we're going to look at some live PayPal options that are trading right now. And number 3, we're going to answer the question that Sheila asked in the beginning, which is, why would you potentially want to buy PayPal shares versus options, and what the potential returns could look like if you bought options instead of shares. So we're going to compare the two. Okay, so that sounds like a plan, and without further ado, let's jump right into it. So first of all, I know some of you are already familiar with options. Again, in this case, you can skip this section, and I'm going to put time codes down below, and you can skip straight to part 2. But today we're going to be talking about call options in particular. And keep in mind, there's also another type of option called a put, but we'll only talk about calls today because that's the kind of options you want to buy if you're bullish on a stock. And I assume most of you are bullish on PayPal, like me. So a call option gives the holder the right but not the obligation to buy a stock at a certain price before a certain date. So let me say that again because I know that was a little bit confusing. A call option gives the holder the right but not the obligation to buy a stock at a certain price before a certain date. Let me try to explain it simpler using maybe an example. So imagine that you're trying to buy a laptop, right? So you go to this store, and this laptop you're trying to buy is on sale for $1,000 when the original price was, let's say, $1,500. So you're about to buy it, but then you ask the clerk, and the clerk tells you that it's out of stock. So you're obviously very upset at this news because it's not your fault that they ordered too little and they're out of stock. So the clerk goes, let me write you what's called a rain check. So a rain check is kind of like a coupon that's issued by the store, and it'll say what item you're trying to buy, and it'll have a price and an expiry date, meaning that you can come back later with this rain check, and then you can still buy the laptop for $1,000, even if the sale is over by then and the price has gone back up to $1,500. So long as you come back and redeem it before the expiry date that's written on the rain check. So you can't come back like a year later and be like, where's my laptop, right? So the rain check is essentially a call option. So imagine instead of a laptop, it's a stock. So the sale price that's written on the rain check, the low price that you can still buy it for, even if the laptop goes back up in price. For a call option, that's called a strike price. And the expiry dates is the same idea. You have to come back and redeem it, or you could choose not to redeem it, right? It's the right but not the obligation to, so you're not obligated to redeem it. But if you wanted to redeem it, you're going to have to come back before it expires. With a call option, though, you also have to pay for it, right? Like you have to buy it on the market, whereas with a rain check, usually a store won't charge you for the rain check. They'll just give it to you since you're there when the sale was happening and they didn't have any stock. So that's kind of another difference. You have to factor in the fact that you have to pay for the call option, obviously, right? They're not just going to give it to you for free. But that's essentially in a nutshell how call options work. So with that being said, let's jump into an example with PayPal. So I'm recording this on Saturday, September 16th, 2023. The market is closed right now, so it'll be the data from September 15th. By the time you see this video, though, if you're watching this on Monday or later, the prices will all be different, but the concepts remain the same. So let's say I pick this really long dated option, okay? So this option is its expiry is way out in the future. This is what is meant by long dated. So this one is expiring on January 16th, 2026. Let's go through how to read this. And again, this is RBC Direct Investing, but whatever brokerage is probably gonna display the information in a similar way. But this is just how RBC decides to display it. So let's go through how to read a lot of this data. Again, I don't have time to go through all the metrics like what delta is, what gamma is, what theta is, but let me know if you guys want to do an even more in-depth video. I'd be happy to accommodate that. But for now, let's take a look at the top left corner. It has the ticker of the stock for this option, which once again is PayPal, PYPL. Then the expiry date, and as I said, this one's for Jan 16, 2026, so 01/16/26. And then $50 is the strike price, and the C stands for call. So as in this is a call option with the strike at 50. So what does this mean if you own this option? Well, if you own this option, you have the right to buy PayPal at $50 per share anytime before Jan 16, 2026, or on Jan 16, 2026 works as well. So you have to pay for the option, and when you're buying the option, you have to pay what's called the ask price, which is the lowest price that the seller is willing to accept currently. In this case, it is $26.45 per option. And this is US dollars, by the way. Now, another thing to note is that options are sold in what's called contracts. So contracts are blocks of 100 call options. So you can only buy options in batches of 100. So you can only buy them in one contract, two contracts. It has to be a whole number of contracts. So at $26.45 per option, remember this is for one option, one contract is 100 options, so it will cost $2,645. So how do you make money? Okay, well, keep in mind that this $2,645, it gives you the right to buy PayPal at $50 per share before the expiry date, right? So your break even would be $26.45 plus the strike price of $50 per share on a per share basis, meaning that if you were to exercise these options, exercise means redeem, by the way. So if you were to redeem these options, no matter what the price of PayPal is, you'd be able to buy it at $50 per share, but you also pay $26.45 per call option. So your total cost basis would be what you paid for the share, which is $50 in this case, plus what you paid for the option. Together, your break-even point would be $76.45, right? I just added the two, 50 plus 26.45. So if you're buying the call option today, you're essentially making this bet that PayPal will be at least $76.45 by Jan 2026 or higher, or else you would take a loss. So that's kind of a real life example of PayPal. So let's move on to part 3 though. Part 3 is, this all sounds super complicated. Why would I go through the effort of buying options instead of shares? Why can't I just buy shares, right? Well, you can just buy shares, but I'm glad you asked that question, because the answer to why would I buy options is leverage. So recall in the previous section, we talked about that one contract is 100 call options, right? So one contract essentially gives you control of 100 shares. But you don't actually have to buy the 100 shares. You're just buying one contract of the call options, which controls 100 shares. So at $26.45 per call, one contract will run you, again, $2,600, right? $2,645. And if you were to buy 100 shares, though, by the time I took this screenshot, PayPal was trading at $64.70. That's like when I did this whole experiment. So if you were to buy 100 shares, you'd have to spend almost $6,500. So it's the difference between $2,600 and $6,500, right? Roughly. So if you do a quick comparison, $64.70 divided by $26.45 gives you a leverage ratio of 2.4461, blah, 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 right? So you're getting almost 2.5x further with your money if you buy the options instead of the shares, meaning that if you were thinking about buying 100 shares, instead you can buy 244 call options. And again, in practice, this has to be in multiples of 100, but you get the point, right? So let me put everything in a chart for you, and maybe this will make it more clear. So consider this scenario, right? So you have 244 calls at a strike of $50 versus 100 shares. And as I said, this should cost the same, right? So $6,470 for each option. So imagine that you're buying 100 shares, but then you thought about it and you're like, I'm going to buy 244 calls instead. So the cost is the same, but if PayPal goes to $50 by the end of when the calls expire, which is, let's say, January 2026, if PayPal is still at $50, then your options will go to zero, right? Like your options will expire worthless. So that means that you lose the $6,470 versus if you had shares, you'd still have $5,000 worth of shares, so you'd lose a lot less. But look what happens if you're right. So if PayPal's market value skyrockets to 100, 150, 200, if you just look at the gains of the calls versus the shares, your gains are much, much greater with the calls versus the shares. And again, the reason for this is because you have 244 calls, right? So for the same money, you could have bought 100 shares or you could have bought 244 calls. So you can also think of it this way, right? So if you wanted to buy 100 calls versus 100 shares, you'd spend a lot less money buying the 100 calls versus the 100 shares. So your returns will look very similar, but you're spending a lot less money up front, right? So it's kind of like you're simulating owning the shares without actually owning the shares, but you're getting the potential upside of owning the shares. I'm not sure if that made sense, right? Let me know if this is confusing, but I can definitely make another video explaining things further if you guys find it confusing. But I think, go watch it over again if it's confusing. But yeah, anyways, again, hopefully that was clear. And let me know if it's helpful. Leave it down in the comments if you're interested at all in options, because I find this stuff super fascinating. Or if it's too complicated for you, you can let me know as well. It's like, hey, I'm just gonna stick with shares. But with that, I'll leave the video here. See you guys in the next video, and be sure to follow me on X. Link for that is down below as always. All right, ciao.